In the underbelly of America's most violent cities, rumors spread about a woman known only as the Queen. She didn't kill for pleasure, and she didn't kill for revenge. She killed for profit, but she never got her own hands dirty. Instead, she found men who already had blood on theirs and turned them into weapons for hire. Her method was simple and terrifying. She would identify serial killers already evading the law, men who thrived in shadows and chaos. Then she offered them something they couldn't resist: protection from law enforcement, access to new victims, and the one thing every killer secretly craves: control. The Queen didn't just pay them, she orchestrated them like pieces on a chessboard. Each killing had a purpose. Each victim was a move in a game no one else could see. Politicians, businessmen, even rival criminals, they all ended up on her list. And when the body count rose, the trail never led back to her. For over a decade, she built an empire on fear and blood. FBI files described her as the most dangerous facilitator in American criminal history. But the truth is, they barely scratched the surface. Because the Queen wasn't just controlling the killers, she was becoming one of them. In mind, in soul, and eventually in body count. For years, her name never appeared in headlines. No mugshots, no courtroom sketches, no grainy surveillance footage. And yet, her influence seeped into every corner of the criminal underworld. She was known in whispers, in coded phone calls, in the cold glances exchanged in prison yards. The Queen, the woman who didn't just survive among killers, she commanded them. While law enforcement hunted lone wolves, she was building a pack. While investigators followed patterns, she was creating new ones. So subtle they looked like accidents, so perfect they erased all traces of her hand. Each murder she ordered served two purposes: eliminate her targets and protect her network. To the outside world, it looked like random violence. To her, it was the architecture of power. Her rise began quietly, in the dark corners of cities, where forgotten people lived and died without headlines. But soon, her reach extended into high society. She dined with senators, shook hands with CEOs, and sat in the front row at charity galas, all while the men she controlled spilled blood for her. You're about to hear the story the FBI never wanted to admit. The one that proves how one woman manipulated the most dangerous men in America and how she almost walked away untouched. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the like button to help bring more true crime stories like this to light. And tell me in the comments, from which country and city are you watching this? I read every single one, and your location might just inspire our next investigation. Now, let's step into the mind of the woman who became the Queen of Crime. Chapter 1. The first piece on the board. It began in a prison visiting room in Illinois, 2006. The walls were a dull yellow, the air thick with the scent of cheap disinfectant and sweat. She walked in, wearing a navy blue blazer, her hair tied back in a way that gave her the appearance of a lawyer, or maybe an FBI agent. The guards barely looked at her. That was her gift. She could make herself invisible when she wanted. Her target sat at a metal table in the far corner, Leonard Haskins, convicted of 4 murders, suspected of at least 9 more. He was serving life without parole. But the Queen had read enough about him to know that prison hadn't killed his hunger. It had only caged it. She introduced herself with a false name, sliding into the chair opposite him. "I know what you've done," she said calmly, "and I'm not here to judge. I'm here to offer you work." Haskins laughed at first, a short, ugly sound. But she kept talking, her voice low, steady, magnetic. She told him about a plan, about how she could arrange his release, not through legal means, but through carefully engineered chaos, a transfer, a staged accident, a van door that never quite locked. All she asked in return was loyalty, and a willingness to kill when she said so. Haskins leaned in, his smile fading. "You want me to be your dog?" She met his eyes without blinking. "No, I want you to be my blade." Something in the way she said it cut through his bravado. He didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. She knew she had him. 2 months later, Leonard Haskins disappeared during a prisoner transport. The official report blamed a paperwork error and a highway accident. The real story was buried in a single sentence of a falsified logbook signed by a guard who never existed. Haskins' first job came a week after his escape. A mid-level enforcer for a drug cartel had been skimming money. The Queen handed Haskins a file, photos, routines, weaknesses. He studied it like scripture. When the body was found, there were no witnesses, no usable forensics. It was as if the man had vanished from the earth. That kill bought her credibility in the underworld. More importantly, it bought her silence. Every criminal organization she touched after that understood one thing. If the Queen wanted someone gone, they were already dead. But she didn't just want a killer, she wanted an army. Haskins was her first soldier, her proof of concept. Over the next year, she quietly scouted for others like him, men with a taste for blood, already proven in the art of disappearing. By the time the FBI realized the same ghostly signature was appearing at multiple murder scenes across 3 states, the Queen had already placed 5 of America's most dangerous serial killers on her payroll, and none of them had any idea that she was already plotting how and when she'd dispose of them. Chapter 2, The Loyalty Test, Los Angeles, 2007. The city was a sprawl of neon and shadows, where people could vanish between one block and the next. It was here that the Queen found her second recruit, a man who called himself Silas Gray. The police had another name for him, the Sunset Strangler. He had left 4 women dead in motels along Sunset Boulevard, each posed with an identical white ribbon tied around their wrists. Unlike Haskins, Silas wasn't in prison. He was living in the margins, squatting in abandoned apartments, drifting between nightclubs and back alleys. The Queen didn't have to break him out, she only had to find him. And when she did, he was already in the middle of selecting his next victim. She intercepted him in a parking garage at 2 a.m., leaning casually against his car as if she'd been waiting for hours. "You waste your talent," she told him. Her tone was almost bored, but her eyes stayed locked on his. He froze, not used to being seen, really seen. She laid out her offer in the dim, echoing space. "You kill for pleasure. I can give you purpose. Money, protection, a network. All I ask is that you follow orders." Silas laughed at her like she was insane, but when she handed him a manila envelope with a name, an address, and $5,000 in cash, the laughter stopped. His first assignment was a test, not of his skill, she already knew he could kill, but of his obedience. The target was a petty loan shark who owed her money. She gave explicit instructions, no signature, no white ribbon, no trace of his usual calling card. If he could erase himself, he could work for her. Silas followed the order to the letter. The loan shark's body turned up in a dumpster 3 days later, stripped of any identifiable pattern. The Queen was pleased. He had proven he could adapt, that his ego wouldn't compromise her operations. As payment, she didn't give him more money. She gave him something better. A safe apartment with no lease, stocked with food, weapons, and a burner phone that would ring only when she needed him. In the world Silas lived in, that was worth more than gold. But the Queen had another reason for keeping him close. Silas was unpredictable, volatile. She wanted to study him, to understand how to keep a killer's chaos on a leash without snapping it. He became her experiment in behavioral control. Weeks later, she had Haskins and Silas meet for the first time. The tension between them was immediate, 2 predators sizing each other up. The Queen watched silently, noting every glance, every twitch of muscle. She wasn't just building a team, she was building a hierarchy. By the time she left Los Angeles, the Queen had 2 killers on her payroll, each unaware of how closely she was already planning their eventual replacements. In her mind, loyalty was temporary, control was forever. Chapter 3, Blood and Ballots. The Queen's first joint assignment for Haskins and Silas wasn't about money. It was about leverage. A state senator from Nevada, Harold Vance, had been quietly siphoning funds from public housing projects into offshore accounts. The Queen didn't care about the theft. She cared about the fact that Vance was about to secure a seat on the Judiciary Committee. That position could be used to protect her network or to destroy it. Her plan wasn't to kill Vance. Not yet. Instead, she needed evidence that would put him permanently in her debt. The problem was that Vance was paranoid, guarded, and surrounded by private security at all times. The only crack in his armor was a secret mistress who lived in a penthouse suite in Reno. Haskins was assigned to handle the mistress, not to kill her, but to get inside her apartment, plant a hidden camera, and retrieve any compromising materials. Silas's job was less subtle, to create a violent distraction 2 blocks away that would pull the senator's security team out of position. The Queen gave them strict rules. No personal signatures, no improvisation, no communication between them except through her. She was the only link in the chain, the only one who saw the full picture. On the night of the operation, Silas staged a carjacking gone wrong outside a high-end casino. He left 2 men bleeding on the pavement, not dead, but close enough to keep the police busy for hours. Meanwhile, Haskins moved like a shadow through the penthouse, bypassing locks and alarms as if he'd lived there for years. Inside the mistress's bedroom, Haskins found more than the Queen had hoped for: a safe filled with photographs, financial documents, and a flash drive labeled only with the letter H. He took everything, leaving behind no trace but the faint smell of his cologne, something the Queen would later scold him for. By dawn, the files were in the Queen's hands. What was on that flash drive would never be made public, but it was enough to bring Vance to his knees. Within a week, he was quietly moving legislation that dismantled an FBI task force investigating organized crime, one that had been getting dangerously close to her network. Haskins and Silas were paid in cash, but the real reward was invisible. For the first time, they had worked side by side without crossing each other's throats. That didn't mean they liked it. In fact, the tension between them had only sharpened. But they respected the results. The Queen saw this as her proof of concept. She could make killers cooperate if she gave them just enough distance and just enough control to keep their egos intact. They didn't have to trust each other. They only had to trust her. What neither man realized was that the Queen had already started planning a backup team. In her world, every piece on the board was replaceable, and no matter how sharp the blade, she never kept it in her hand for too long. Chapter 4. The Black Widow. Her name in the streets was Isabella Cruz, but the newspapers had once called her the Black Widow. Born in Miami to Cuban immigrants, she had a history soaked in betrayal and blood. By the time she was 24, 3 of her wealthy husbands were dead, each under suspiciously accidental circumstances. None of the deaths were ever proven murders, but every detective who touched her file believed otherwise. The Queen didn't care about proof. She cared about results. Isabella was different from Haskins and Silas. They were predators who hunted with force and chaos. She was venom, patient, calculated, and deadly in small doses. The Queen had been tracking her for nearly 2 years, waiting for the perfect moment to make contact. That moment came when Isabella narrowly escaped a hit, ordered by a cartel lieutenant she had double-crossed. The meeting was staged at a waterfront restaurant in Key Biscayne. Isabella arrived in a white dress, her hair pinned high, a smile that could sell diamonds hiding the fact she was carrying a blade under the hem. The Queen greeted her like an old friend, speaking in Spanish first, then switching to flawless English. "I don't need someone who kills for survival," the Queen said, sipping her wine. "I need someone who kills for influence." Isabella tilted her head, intrigued. "Influence is expensive," the Queen smiled, "and I can afford you." The first assignment was a test of both skill and subtlety. A corporate lobbyist in Washington, D.C. had been funneling information to a rival network. He needed to disappear, but it had to look like he was never targeted. Isabella approached the problem like a stage performance, befriending him at a political fundraiser, drawing him into a private relationship, and slowly dismantling his life until the final act, a boating accident on the Potomac River. The Queen was impressed not only by the kill but by the trail of confusion Isabella left behind. Every witness remembered the lobbyists last night differently. The Coast Guard ruled it an accident. The Queen knew it was perfection. When the Queen introduced Isabella to Haskins and Silas, the air in the room turned electric. Haskins saw her as a potential threat to his position. Silas saw her as a distraction, one that could get him killed. Isabella, on the other hand, studied them both like pieces of a puzzle she would eventually solve. The first time the three worked together, the Queen watched closely. The target was a corrupt banker in Chicago whose death needed to send a message. Haskins handled the break-in, Silas controlled the chaos outside, and Isabella delivered the fatal dose of poison during a staged seduction. The job went flawlessly, but the tension between them was undeniable. The Queen liked tension. It kept them sharp, competitive, and predictable in their unpredictability. But she also knew that too much friction could ignite into violence she couldn't control. She began implementing a rule. None of them would know the full scope of a job. Each would receive only their part of the plan, and only she would see the full picture. By the end of that year, the Queen had her most dangerous trio yet: a brute, a ghost, and a venomous viper. Together, they were unstoppable. Separately, they were liabilities. And somewhere deep inside, the Queen already knew that when the time came, she would have to decide which ones would live and which ones would quietly disappear. Chapter 5: Shadows over Europe. The Queen's operations had always been domestic, but in 2009, she received an offer too lucrative and too strategic to ignore. A private consortium of arms dealers wanted a European diplomat removed from the game. His name was Ambassador Lucien Marchand, a French political figure known publicly for advocating peace treaties, but privately for sabotaging weapons contracts worth billions. His death, they insisted, needed to send a message. It wasn't just about killing him. The Queen's clients wanted chaos, enough to destabilize Marchand's political faction and open the door for more profitable wars. That meant the kill had to be spectacular, impossible to ignore, and yet completely deniable. The Queen accepted the challenge. For this mission, she chose all three of her operatives: Haskins for brute infiltration, Silas for external disruption, and Isabella for the final blow. The location was Paris. During a high-profile gala at the Palais Garnier Opera House, Marchand would be surrounded by dignitaries, security, and press. Perfect cover. They arrived in France under false identities, each unaware of the other's full role. The Queen orchestrated the plan from a luxury suite overlooking the Seine, her laptop displaying building schematics, security rotations, and live feeds from planted cameras. Haskins's job was to breach the service corridors beneath the Opera House and plant a timed blackout device. Silas was stationed 3 blocks away, ready to trigger a staged riot that would pull local police in the wrong direction. Isabella's role was the most delicate. Approach Marchand during the blackout, lure him into a private corridor, and deliver a fatal dose of ricin disguised as a champagne toast. When the night came, everything unfolded with chilling precision. At exactly 9:42 p.m., the grand chandeliers of the Palais Garnier flickered, then went black. Guests gasped, security scrambled. Silas's riot began in the streets, smoke, shouting, the sound of breaking glass. In the confusion, Isabella moved like a phantom, her white gown gliding through the crowd until she found Marchand. He didn't recognize her. She had met him once before under another name, months earlier, planting the seeds of familiarity. "Monsieur Marchand," she whispered, offering a flute of champagne. He smiled, took the glass, and never saw the pinprick that delivered the poison through his palm as they toasted. By the time the lights returned, Marchand was on the floor, surrounded by frantic aides. Officially, the cause of death was a heart attack brought on by stress during the blackout. Unofficially, the Queen's clients knew the truth, and so did every rival who understood the warning. Not even an ocean could protect you from her reach. The next morning, French media exploded with theories, conspiracy chatter, and political accusations. The Marchand faction fractured overnight. In Washington, a certain arms deal quietly slid through Congress without opposition. The Queen had not just killed a man, she had shifted the balance of power on 2 continents. From her Paris suite, the Queen watched the news coverage, her operatives already on flights back to the US. None of them knew she had pocketed triple the agreed payment. None of them knew the mission had also served another purpose, to see how far her killers would go in foreign territory, and who among them might eventually become a liability abroad. Chapter 6. Cracks in the Crown. The Queen prided herself on perfection. Every operation she touched left no trace, until the night everything unraveled in Dallas. The job was supposed to be simple. Eliminate a mid-tier money launderer named Patrick Harlow, whose greed had started to bleed into the Queen's accounts. The kill needed to be fast, quiet, and invisible. Haskins was assigned as the executioner, Silas as the lookout, and Isabella as the cleaner. The plan: Haskins would enter Harlow's penthouse through the roof, take him out, and leave before security made their rounds. Silas would monitor the street for police presence, while Isabella wiped any digital and physical evidence. But things went wrong the moment Haskins stepped inside. Unbeknownst to the Queen, Harlow had been under FBI surveillance for months. Tiny wireless cameras, ones her tech people had missed, were hidden throughout the apartment. The moment Haskins slit Harlow's throat, a live feed went straight to a federal task force office in Washington. Silas, impatient and distracted, spotted a patrol car circling the block and decided to neutralize it without orders. His rash move created a gunshot echo that shattered the operation's silence and drew even more law enforcement to the scene. Isabella's cleanup became impossible. The moment she entered the penthouse, the sound of sirens was already closing in. She wiped what she could, but in her haste, she missed a glass of wine and the lipstick mark on its rim. That lipstick shade, later identified in a lab, didn't belong to Harlow. By dawn, the story was on every major news outlet. Mysterious triple scene in Dallas, the body of Patrick Harlow, the destroyed patrol car, and security footage showing only the blurred silhouette of a large man in a mask. Haskins. The FBI didn't have names, but they now had patterns. The Queen's fury was quiet, but lethal. She didn't scream. She simply summoned the 3 to a warehouse on the outskirts of Houston. She stood in the shadows, letting them stew in silence before speaking. Mistakes I can forgive. Exposure I cannot. Haskins blamed Silas for the gunshot. Silas accused Isabella of sloppy cleanup. Isabella didn't defend herself. She just stared at the Queen, unblinking, as if daring her to decide who would die first. The room felt like a loaded gun, with 3 fingers on the trigger. The Queen didn't kill anyone that night. Instead, she imposed new rules: tighter communication, shorter time frames, and, most importantly, direct surveillance from her at all times. They would no longer operate with partial instructions. She would be in their ears every second, every move. But the damage was already done. In an office in Quantico, a newly formed unit of the FBI began reviewing cases stretching back years, searching for the invisible hand behind them. And though they didn't yet have a name, one agent had already given her an unofficial title: the Queen of Crime. Chapter 7. The Hunter. His name was Special Agent Daniel Mercer, and he didn't believe in ghosts until the Queen. Mercer had spent 12 years in the Behavioral Analysis Unit, chasing serial killers across the country. But this case was different. The killings he was seeing didn't match any known profile. Different methods, different motives, no forensic overlap. And yet, deep in his gut, Mercer knew there was a single mind behind them all. It was the Dallas incident that first gave him something tangible. Blurry footage of a masked man, traces of an unknown lipstick, and a perfectly timed blackout in a separate city on the same night. Mercer wasn't looking at chaos, he was looking at choreography. Someone was orchestrating these murders like a symphony. Mercer had a reputation in Quantico for being relentless. He'd skip sleep, skip meals, and bury himself in case files until his eyes burned. He didn't just study killers, he studied the world they lived in, the people they touched, the shadows they left behind. And every breadcrumb he followed in this case led to one invisible set of fingerprints. The Queen's. The first time Mercer said her name in the office, his colleagues laughed. A woman? Running contract killers? They didn't believe him. But he had the timeline, the motive maps, and the geographical patterns that tied together 32 murders over 6 years. All different, all flawless, until Dallas. He began reconstructing her network piece by piece. In Chicago, a break-in with no stolen property but a dead banker. In Los Angeles, a carjacking that coincided with the disappearance of a lobbyist. In Paris, the sudden death of Ambassador Marchand. Individually, they were unrelated. Together, they formed a crown-shaped pattern on Mercer's investigation board. The Queen noticed him before he even realized it. One of her political contacts mentioned a bureau man sniffing around too close. Rather than eliminate him, she decided to study him. A hunter could be dangerous, but he could also be predictable if you learned his habits. Mercer's first close call came in Baltimore. Acting on a tip, he raided an abandoned textile warehouse linked to a suspected contract killer. The place was empty, except for a single playing card pinned to the wall. The Queen of Spades. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing but the card, and a faint trace of perfume in the air. From that moment, the hunt became personal. Mercer stopped referring to her as the suspect in his notes. She was the Queen. He began talking to her in the margins of his files, as if she could read them. "I know you were here," he wrote once, next to a crime scene photo. "I will find you." For the Queen, Mercer wasn't just an enemy, he was entertainment. She began leaving subtle signatures in her work, not enough to convict, but enough for him to notice. A flower placed at a crime scene, a specific date chosen for a hit. It was a conversation only the two of them understood. Neither of them realized it yet, but this was the start of something dangerous. Mercer was getting closer with every step, and the Queen was beginning to enjoy the chase. In the shadows of America's underworld, the deadliest game of cat and mouse had just begun, and only one of them would survive it. Chapter 8. The Weakest Link. It was Silas who made the mistake. He was in Phoenix, assigned to eliminate a whistleblower accountant who had been quietly feeding documents to a congressional ethics committee. The Queen's orders were clear: no witnesses, no unnecessary noise. But Silas, impatient as ever, decided to improvise. And improvisation was always the enemy of invisibility. The kill went as planned, but his getaway didn't. A security camera from a nearby gas station caught the edge of his face as he adjusted his mask. It was only a fraction of a second, but it was enough for facial recognition software to start working. Mercer's team ran the footage through every law enforcement database. 3 days later, they had a name: Silas Kane. Mercer didn't move immediately. He knew that catching Kane meant getting closer to the Queen. He ordered surveillance, tracked Kane's burner phones, followed his cash withdrawals. Slowly, the invisible lines began to form, connecting Kane to cities and murders that had been cold for years. The Queen saw the danger before Kane did. One of her contacts inside a private bank flagged an unusual freeze request from a government agency on an account Kane used. That was all she needed to know. Mercer was closing in, and Kane was now a liability. She called a meeting in a dimly lit motel room outside El Paso. Haskins sat stone-faced. Isabella watched with that quiet, predatory calm of hers, and Kane paced like a trapped animal. "They've got your face," the Queen said, her voice even. "It's only a matter of time before they have your body." Kane swore he could disappear, but the Queen didn't believe in luck. Her choice was simple: attempt a high-risk extraction that could expose the entire network, or cut Kane loose before he brought the FBI straight to her. In her world, survival always came before loyalty. She sent Haskins with Kane under the pretense of moving him to a safe house in New Mexico. In reality, Haskins's instructions were different: end Kane's life in a way that left nothing to tie back to her. Haskins didn't question it. In this business, orders weren't debated. The next morning, Mercer's team found Kane's body in the desert, his teeth smashed, fingerprints burned off. Officially, it was an unsolved homicide. Unofficially, Mercer knew exactly what it meant. "She's cleaning house," he told his team. "She knows we're coming." The Queen felt no remorse. In fact, she viewed Kane's death as a message to the rest of her crew. Mistakes weren't forgiven twice, but Mercer saw it differently. Kane's elimination proved he was getting under her skin. It meant he was close. For the first time, the Queen began to feel the faintest flicker of vulnerability. Not fear, not yet, but the awareness that her crown could be tilted if she let the hunter dictate the pace of the game. From here on, every move would have to be sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. Chapter 9. The Face Behind the Crown. It happened in Boston. Mercer had been chasing shadows for so long that he almost didn't believe it when one of them finally solidified. An encrypted message intercepted by a joint FBI-Interpol task force contained a single phrase: "Your Majesty will be arriving in Boston under the name Evelyn Cross." Mercer knew instantly. This was her. The alias was clever. Evelyn Cross had a perfectly clean background, complete with tax records, business filings, and even a charitable foundation for war orphans. But Mercer saw through the facade. Cross was scheduled to attend a private auction at the Halcyon Club, a sanctuary for the elite where cameras were banned and questions were never asked. Mercer didn't go in guns blazing. He went in alone, blending into the black tie crowd. And then he saw her. Tall, poised, a glass of champagne in one hand, speaking in a soft French accent that could disarm a general. He felt an almost surreal moment of recognition. After years of files, crime scenes, and whispers, the Queen had a face. But she saw him too, and she smiled. Not a startled, caught-off-guard smile, but the slow, knowing smile of someone who had been expecting him. "Agent Mercer," she said when he approached, her voice silk over steel. "I wondered when we'd finally meet." He wanted to arrest her right there, but there was no warrant, no probable cause, just the two of them standing in a room full of powerful people who would gladly lie under oath to protect her. So, he played along, asking questions laced with accusation. She parried each one like a master fencer, turning his own words back on him. An hour later, Mercer returned to his hotel room to find the door ajar. Inside, on the carpet, lay the body of a man, a local journalist known for investigating political corruption. The room reeked faintly of the same perfume she'd worn at the auction. The Boston PD arrived within minutes, responding to an anonymous tip. The journalist's death was ruled a stabbing, and the knife, still slick with blood, was found in Mercer's bathroom sink. His fingerprints were on the handle. He tried to explain, but the case was airtight. No forced entry. His keycard was the only one used to access the room. Witnesses placed him with the victim earlier that evening, at the Halcyon Club, where the Queen had introduced them. Every detail was perfectly staged. Mercer wasn't arrested, not yet. His FBI badge bought him just enough time to claim he was being framed, but the damage was done. Officially, he was now under internal investigation. Unofficially, every lead he had on the Queen was suddenly off limits. She had removed him from the game without firing a single shot. From a penthouse across the harbor, the Queen watched the news coverage of Mercer's possible involvement in the murder. She sipped her wine and smiled, knowing that in this war, perception was as deadly as bullets. For now, the hunter was bleeding, and she intended to keep it that way. Chapter 10. Checkmate. Mercer had lost his badge, his reputation, and, most dangerously, his patience. 3 weeks after Boston, he was officially placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. That meant no resources, no legal authority, and no backup. But it also meant no rules. If he was going to take the Queen down, he'd have to become the kind of man he'd spent his life hunting. He started by tracing her money. Not the official bank accounts tied to Evelyn Cross, but the shadow pipelines she used to launder payments, shell corporations in Belize, art auctions in Monaco, cryptocurrency wallets hidden behind layers of false identities. Each thread led him closer to a warehouse on the docks of Savannah, Georgia, where her next shipment and next kill was scheduled. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of salt and oil. Crates lined the walls, unmarked but humming faintly with the sound of hidden refrigeration units. Mercer knew enough about her operations to guess what they contained: black market organs, harvested from victims no one would miss. She was already there, dressed in a dark coat, her hair pulled back, her expression calm as if she had been expecting him. "I thought you might come," she said softly, stepping out from between the crates. "The thing about hunters, Mercer, is that they never know when they've become the prey." He raised his gun, but his hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of what this moment meant. He could end it here, but without witnesses, without evidence, her empire would survive him. Killing her wouldn't stop the machine, it would only crown another in her place. The Queen, ever the strategist, saw the hesitation and stepped closer. "You've already lost," she whispered. "They think you're a murderer. They've stripped your badge. The only way out for you now is with me." She wasn't offering mercy, she was offering recruitment. For a moment, Mercer almost believed her. The thought of turning the hunt into partnership was intoxicating. Together, they could dismantle rivals, control entire networks, and write the rules of the underworld. But then he remembered Kane's body in the desert. He remembered the journalist in Boston, and he remembered that smile. The standoff lasted less than a breath. A sound, the faint click of a safety being released, came from the shadows above. Haskins was there, rifle trained on Mercer. In the corner of his eye, Mercer saw movement. Isabella, knife in hand. It wasn't a duel anymore. It was an execution. Mercer made his choice. He fired once, not at her head, but at the refrigeration unit behind her. The bullet pierced the casing, sending a geyser of blood and cold mist into the air. In the chaos, he dove for cover, bullets sparking off metal around him. When the smoke cleared, the Queen was gone. To this day, no one knows if she escaped that night or if her body lies somewhere at the bottom of the Savannah River. Mercer vanished too, his name fading from FBI records, whispered only in certain circles as the man who hunted the Queen, and might still be hunting her. Somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, the game continues, and no one can say for sure who's winning. Some say the docks of Savannah still hold the echo of that night, the hiss of ruptured refrigeration units, the smell of salt and blood mixing in the air, and the whisper of a woman's voice carried by the wind. The Queen became a ghost again, slipping back into the shadows she had ruled for so long. For Agent Mercer, the lines between hunter and hunted were erased forever. Officially, he no longer exists. No files, no badge, no trace in the Bureau's archives. But in the criminal underworld, his name carries a strange weight. Some speak it with respect, others with fear. They say he's still out there chasing her. Others claim he's working for her now, a silent enforcer wearing the crown he once swore to destroy. And somewhere, perhaps in a penthouse high above a city skyline or deep in the basement of an unmarked building, the Queen watches the news, her glass of wine in hand, smiling at the headlines, because she knows what Mercer knows. In this game, there is no final move. There are only players, and the ones who think they've already won are the ones most likely to die next.